Okay, so we just learned how to write to a file. That was pretty easy. We're writing some kind of random information to the file. Let's take the next step, and what we're going to do now is write information that's inside of an object, inside of an array, to a file. Okay, so we're going to make another class here, and we're going to be very creative here. We're going to write writing array objects to file. Okay, writing array objects to file, and then have a main method there.
So both of the two classes that we need, they both need a main method to work.
We just want, we're making them have a main method so that we can just run them individually. Yeah. Okay, so cleaning that up, we just start like this. First thing we're going to do here is we're going to create an array of points. Okay, so we're going to go point array, call it points, make it equal to these points. Okay, so it doesn't have to be the points that I'm giving you, but I'm just going to go ahead and make some new point objects in here. So 3, 4 is one of them. And then I'm going to stack these so that it's just easier to look at. And make a new point. Okay, 5, 10 is my next point. New point. 1, comma, -1 is my next point. Another point. 2, 4. Okay. And then I'm going to put some points in here that are null. Okay. Now I want you to notice something here. When we declare an array this way, okay, we're putting in here that all of these things are point objects. This bracket says this is where I'm starting to define my array. This is index, the element at index 0. Okay, just to review some things about arrays. The element at index 1, the element at index 2, the element at index 3, index 4, index 5. Okay? Once I'm done with that, I want to put in an ending bracket. All right? Yours may have created an ending bracket for you, and then I want to put a semicolon just so I know that this is the end of the array. All right? So let's import point. Okay, and so I have some points inside this array. Now I want to write them to the file. Okay, or to a file. Oh, looks like I messed up here. Okay, so this one, when I did this, it gave me this bracket, and I just didn't notice it. So now I have an extra bracket hanging out there. So you know, if I do this and I go up here and I right click, this thinks that the class is ending right there, but I know that the class should end there. It thinks that the main method is ending here, but that bracket should be the end of the main method. And so this one is ending here. That means this guy's an extra one, so let me delete that. So I shouldn't have any errors right now. Okay? So you guys might be, you know, you maybe didn't have that problem. Okay, so to save the array of objects, we're going to loop, so we're going to use the while loop, loop through all the elements and save each property of each element to a new line of the file. Okay? This may not be the very best way of doing this, but this is a way that's understandable. All right? So, when I say property of the object, let's apply that to a point. What are the properties of a point? What is a point made up of? X and Y. Okay, so I want to write its x coordinate to the file, and I want to write its y coordinate to the file for each object on there. Okay, So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to create a file here. So file, I'm going to call this point file. That's going to be a new file. And we're going to call that one points.txt. Okay? You really can come up with whatever you want for your file extension, unless it's one that, like, everyone already knows what it is. Okay? You know, like, so .mp3. You don't want to create your own file, call it .mp3. You could, okay? But it might confuse the operating system into thinking like, oh, that's a sound file. And then you got a bunch of random crap in there, and it just is kind of confusing. Okay? So .txt is pretty safe. All right. Next, we're going to create the writer. So that's going to be that print stream again. And again, this time we're writing to the point file. Anybody need time to catch up? Nico, do you need time? Okay. Okay, cool. So next thing we're going to do is loop through the array and save its elements. All right? Which index should I start at when I'm looping through the array? Index 0, right? Arrays always start with index 0. All right? So we're going to go ahead and put an int index equal to 0. And we're basically going to say, like, we're start at index 0. And then we're going to go while, all right? While what? How do I know which points I want to write to the file? Okay, so that's a consideration, right? We don't want to write the null ones. How do I know how many points are possibly in here? Yeah. So how many points are in there? How many elements do I have in here? Regardless of whether they're null or not. How many things do I have in there? 6, right? So one way you could do this loop is you could say while index is less than 6, okay? In general, if you remember, what we like to do here is we put, instead of 6, the array name dot length. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're going to say while index is less than 6, okay? And I'm just going to comment that in there. All right? Inside of the loop, then, what we want to do is we want to say, all right, write this point's x and y. Then write this point's x and y. Then write this point's x and y. Then write this point's x and y. Don't write this point's x and y. Don't write this point's x and y. Okay? So how do I know when I want to write a point's x and y and when I don't want to? Which ones do I want to? Jayla, you already answered this question. Okay? So the ones that are not null should get written. Does that make sense? So the way that we test that in here is we check to see if points at index not equal to null. All right, and we'll come back to that in a second. So what we're doing here is saying, all right, if this element is not null, then go get your writer, print a line to the file, and what you want to write to the file is that element's x coordinate, so dot x. All right, and we want to do the same thing with the y coordinate. Okay. Inside of the while loop, but after the if, we want to make sure that we're going to the next index. So index equals index plus 1. After the while loop, we're done writing the file, and when we're done writing the file, we want to close that writer. Okay? So we always want to close the file connection when we're done. All right? So let's go back and just talk about this real quick. When you see this part of this code, how many of you feel like you understand what this means? Okay, so we got to talk about that a little bit, all right? So let me just kind of get to a point where we can see the elements and look at this, okay? If I do this, okay, if I change this from index to 2, how many of you think you can tell me what the x-coordinate of points 2 means? Or what is the x-coordinate of points 2? What do you think it is? The x-coordinate is 1, right? Okay, so up here what you're doing is you're saying, all right, well, this is points 0, this is points 1, and this is points 2. And the x-coordinate of that one is 1. Okay, so what if I change this to 3? What's the y-coordinate of points 3? 4. Are you guys able to figure that out now? So what we're doing, instead of putting in a number in there, is we're putting in a variable. And we're saying, if I put an index, this refers, this that I have highlighted right now, refers to one of these elements. Okay? We're not sure which one. It depends on the value of index. All right? But as I look at this, if I find one of these that's not null, then I want to write it to the file. So basically what we're doing here is saying, if the element is not null, okay, write its x and y to the file. All right? Down here then, we're just going to the next index. In the array. And we're really almost done, but we just forgot to do something, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do here is we're just going to import some stuff. So let's import the file, because that's underlined. We want this to be java.io file, okay? So let's import that. And now this gives me a problem, okay? So this is that runtime exception, okay? This is basically saying, like, when you're going to connect to a file, you have to catch that runtime exception that says maybe the file wasn't found. Okay? So what we're going to do is, please pay attention to where I am on the code right now, because otherwise you're going to get lost. Okay? Before I do any of this file stuff, I'm going to put in here try. And what I want to try to do is all of this stuff. Okay? So after writer.close, I'm going to put in my end bracket for the try. And right under that, I'm going to put my catch. Okay? So that's file not found exception. And again, I just always call it like FNF or FNFE for exception, file not found. Okay? Brackets to say what we want to do when that thing is caught. All right? Or when that thing happens. And then put in some kind of error message. So the file wasn't found. Now, if you want to be fancy, right after writer.close. If you want to be fancy, to make this actually an error message, you can replace out with ERR, and now it's an error message. Okay, and you can also import file not found exception. Okay. I'm going to do one more thing before I run this, okay, and that is just I'm going to reformat it because I don't like to see my code look like this where I have like a line and then a closing bracket underneath it. I think all of this stuff from there to there should be reformatted or should be indented in. So I'm going to go Control I. And that just indents that stuff in there. All right? So that's that. Let's save that. Let's run that. And then I'm going to go over to Files, right-click, and refresh. And now I have this points.txt file right here. And if I open that up, that has the X and Y coordinates for each of the elements in that points array. So I just ran it, and then I did right-click and refresh so that I could see the file. Okay? So that's the basics for if you have an array and you want to write all of the stuff that's in the array to a file. This is basically what you do. You just make a loop through it, and then write each part of the thing, each part of the object to the file. So if we were doing that for contacts, guys, what do we have to write to the file? What is a contact made up of?
Name,
first name, last name,
email,
and phone.
address.
Okay?